My name's Pete, and I'm an addict from Philadelphia. Well, I'm actually from Ivyland. It's a little bit north of Philadelphia. NA started in Philadelphia in 1970, to the best of my knowledge. I've done a lot of digging around, and started with, there was like 2 meetings, and they were sort of on a revolving basis. Like I heard some of the early meetings out in California. They met in different places, and within the first 5 or 6 months, I know they grew to about 4 or 5 meetings, and this was spread over. It was between like Philadelphia. There was one out in South Jersey, which was right across the river, and out in Norristown, I think they got one started. And this was spread over a pretty wide range of eastern Pennsylvania. And from talking to some of the early addicts, I wasn't around then, but everyone just piled into whoever had a car. Usually there was one person had a car, and he'd drive all over and pick them up and take them to the meetings. And it didn't. They had their first intergroup. They called it intergroup then in 1972. Up through 1975, I think it grew up to maybe about 6 or 7 meetings that I know of. So I think I'm pretty sure around 74 or 75 is when someone heard about or hooked up with someone from California, or they heard about a World Service office, and they heard that they should call the intergroup area services, so they had their first area services meeting. I've heard that in 75 and 76 there was some effort done in the Philadelphia on writing 12 steps for Narcotics Anonymous. They produced a lot of material, but there's a lot of confusion as to what ever happened to that. I think it got sent out somewhere. I don't know if they sent it to the wrong place or if it got lost in a fire, or I've heard of, that's all kind of up in the air. But up through about 1979, I know it had grown up to, they got between 10 and 15 meetings, and I know, like, I came around 1980, early 80, and the meeting list had like 17 meetings on it. And the first meeting I went to was a step meeting, and they were still using a 12 and 12 book from another fellowship, and substituting the word addict and addiction for and kind of hard when you got down to John Barleycorn, but we got by, But then somebody talked to a guy. There was a guy out in Pittsburgh who was involved with public information. I think he was the Bob P. He was, I believe, public information at the world level, and he mentioned that I think just from the World Service Conference in '80, I think it had come down that that was a violation of the 6th tradition to use outside literature in our meeting, and that came down to our group, this group that I was in, and we had a business meeting. It was after I think my second NA meeting. I sat in on this business meeting, and there was it was crazy. Like, everybody that was in there knew that, like, well, we really needed this meeting. Like, it was our lifeline, and and they're talking about, well, why don't we just have a regular meeting? And everybody's saying, no, we need the steps, and so somebody said, why don't we write our own? And like, whew, everybody really like caught fire, said, yeah, let's write our own steps. And, and so we voted, and we voted to have a step reform committee, and we met once a week in this fellow's apartment. And we sat down, and we had a tape recorder, and we talked about each step each week. We started out with the first step, and then we went to the second step the next week. And everybody, there's about eight or nine people came to that meeting faithfully every week. the people that were really concerned about the survival of that group. That's what it was about. We just wanted steps for that group so we could survive, and it was really an experience and a half. Like, you know, we just talk about how we felt about the step on a tape recorder, and like we didn't realize you know, there was that much. You know, like we learned a lot about the steps just by sharing there. And when we were up to about the 5th or 6th step, everybody started talking about this first East Coast convention out in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and that's when I started getting an inkling that Narcotics Anonymous existed outside of Humeville Grace Episcopal Church. You know, and this one guy that was involved with the Step Reform Committee, one time he got on the phone to someone from Atlanta. I said, Atlanta, Jesus Christ, you know. And you know, I just couldn't believe that. But we got to the convention there, and there was people from like 15 different states, and you know, I was, you know, for me that was just like you know, I sat through that convention and just, you know, total surrender. You know, up until then, like I had a lot of reservations about NA because you know, I figured, well, this other program's been around for years, and you know, it's proven surrender. You know, I knew that, wow, there's people that have been clean for years in NA, and but a lot of people caught fire like I did right there at that convention. That convention was just unreal. But there was a meeting, and at that convention, a lot of talk about writing a book, and you know, like we were all excited. Hey, we've been working on the steps. You know, let's get together, and you know, and it turned out there'd been people working on writing a book for NA for quite a while, and you know, so we went back home and started a literature committee for our area, and there was like about 6 literature committees around the country, all working on one purpose: a book for recovering addicts by recovering addicts. And you know, that generated a lot of energy, just working on that. And a lot of people went back from that convention just fired up and just started, you know, just got real involved as much as they could. You know, they devoted their whole life to NA. And in the next year, NA in Philadelphia area grew from 18 meetings to 65, I think, in a year's time. And then in the year after that, it grew from 65 to, well, at this point, there's what used to be an area is now 4 areas. And to the, like they said, they're not sure how many's in Atlanta. There's at least 150 meetings in that area. There's like, you know, for a while there, we'd go down to the area service, and it was like, where are you going today? We're going to the zoo, because it was a zoo. There's just so many people there, you know, and you know, everybody wanted to say their opinion. But it's been incredible, the growth that, you know, in the last 2 years, it just has, you know, gone beyond our wildest expectations, and I don't know, it's just real beautiful to see. And today there's a book. Yeah. Right, that's great. Yeah. All right. That's all fulfilling.
My name is Bill. I'm an addict from New Jersey, and this is going to be brief because our history is pretty brief so far. I've Xeroxed all the literature from the earliest states that our state can manage to get together. So it really began sometime around 1978. From what I understand, there was a couple of false starts. A social worker had obtained a white pamphlet from California, and but nobody can put anything together on that. You're looking in disbelief. Do you know? Maybe you know something I don't know, Greg? Oh, okay. No, because like no. In a way, we're still searching. And then the second start, 3 people, and I believe they came from the Philadelphia region. And out of those original 3, only 1 managed to stay. And we're ever grateful to all 3, although 2 didn't get the program. Then it started taking a foothold late 78, early 79. And one of the solidifying factors was a doctor who had got his recovery in the other fellowship. However, he was a genuine addict also. And he managed to hold the group together, and they started in a house, and they started in a VA hospital. And their first attempt of branching out, they went to a methadone clinic. And they weren't that successful, although everybody's sobriety was pretty, like, new and shaky. However, the methadonians thought that they were the listen, they were the recovering addicts, and it was sort of like going to be for them. Like, as long as they didn't do Valiums and Coke, they were recovering addicts on methadone. And they tried to stick it out. They tried to struggle, thinking like, sooner or later they would see the light. But it seemed like the people that were still addicted outnumbered the people that were clean, and it was just a little too stressful in the beginning. So it went back to the VA hospital, and then it stretched out to where I'm from, Jersey City, and it stayed there for, I came in 1980, the beginning of 80, in Jersey City, and then I had the luck of going out to Ohio. We knew there was a book, and there was probably a couple of copies of the gray one, but people didn't share. I had it. This is it. But also I could see the confusion and the doubt, too. They also probably didn't know. Like, I know there's a lot of different versions of the Bible, So, like, nobody knew if this one is the real thing or something like that. If it's the real Narcotics Anonymous, we don't trust California. And so they kind of like, I went out to that literature thing in Ohio, and I believed, I finally, understood that Narcotics Anonymous really existed. And we brought back, and I Xeroxed the shit out of everything I got my hands on. And a lot of people told me I was probably violating this or violating that, but I didn't know. So, like, I couldn't. If I don't think I'm doing wrong, I don't know. And with the 3 meetings going, and the 3 chapters that were approved, I figured they were approved. It counted. Something would happen, and it really did. And that, I think, like, there's the entire history of, or the future of NA will be solidified by that book. We went from 3 groups up to presently 41 in less than 2 years. I think that's somewhat significant. And over half of them groups have been in existence for a year. So that's also significant. Just the first couple of meetings with that book, they'd look at it and they'd throw it down on the floor and say, I don't want this shit, I want to talk about problems. And it was what we picked up was like, if that's all you talk about, that's all you're going to have is problems. And the change was people were able to start talking about recovery because we believed it was possible, but we believed it was out there. We just never knew that, in fact, when addicts got sick where we lived, we sent them out here with their aunts and uncles in these other states to get better. And then they come home and use again. So we just thought that, like, anywhere outside of our immediate areas where clean people are. And that's all right. We sure had a lot to learn, and our state will be internally grateful and humble to everything that comes from Narcotics Anonymous. Thank you.
My name's Jim. I'm an addict from Flint, Michigan. And some of this predates my involvement with the fellowship, so I just got to tell you hearsay of talking with other people. I understand that a fellow named Dave come out of a insane asylum in Ypsilanti in 1969 and walked into Detroit's only Narcotics Anonymous meeting. And they gave him a little white book and some pamphlets and told him to come back. And he got shook down outside the meeting by the police force. And that was a common occurrence in Detroit in 1969, if you even looked like you might be doing some dope. So Dave didn't go back right away, and when he did go back, he couldn't find the meeting. he doesn't know, but he guesses that other people were shook down also, and that the meeting folded perhaps because of that kind of pressure. Dave went on and moved eventually up to Bay City, and like 6 years later decided that he needed a little more than what he had. He'd relapsed a couple times. He started a Narcotics Anonymous meeting, which is the oldest continuous meeting in Michigan in 1969 or 75 in Bay City. And I stumbled into that meeting myself in 1978 and didn't know what it was. I mean, I knew it was Narcotics Anonymous, but I didn't know it had anything to offer me. Dave was sitting back saying, "I'm an addict, and I'm studying," and he had this kind of salesman pitch to him. All I knew was I didn't want no part of what he was like. So I went back and I continued to stay stoned like I'd been doing all along, and eventually hit my bottom and started confessing in meetings of the other fellowship and was real uncomfortable with that, and got with some other people I knew who had drug problems, and we set up Flint, Michigan's oldest NA meeting in an Alano club. I'm the only person who still goes to that meeting out of the people that started it. The rest of them have either relapsed or gone back to where they got their clean time. And they're still doing what they were doing, and I'm not still doing what I was doing, fortunately. For a year or so, I was in that meeting, and along with some other people, we talked about dope mostly. We didn't really talk about problems. We were just tickled to death to be in a meeting where we could talk about dope, you know, and run our little war story. I shot up more than anybody else stuff, you know. And consequently, the meeting didn't catch on with anybody else. No wonder I'm the only one. People came in. I know people in Flint who weren't sure that they were welcome at that meeting because they didn't shoot up anything when they were using. And so they didn't know if that meeting was for them. And hell, I didn't know if it was for them. All I knew was I could talk about my shit. I started looking in some other places after being uncomfortable with Narcotics Anonymous, or what I knew of Narcotics Anonymous. I'd kind of created this thing out of my mind, right? We'd borrowed what we knew of the other fellowship and kind of patterned ourselves on traditions that had evolved locally in Flint, Michigan, in 12-step groups there that I find today don't work for me. But then I thought they did. I thought it was the only way. And became dissatisfied, and finally I was driven to go to a convention in February of this year. Our first Narcotics Anonymous meeting in Flint, incidentally, started in 1979 and is still going. Now, after February, we have 6 meetings a week in Flint. A step meeting based on reading of the basic text, the steps that are outlined in the basic text. We have a meeting where we read the literature, a Sicker Than Others group. We were pretty much, we came back from Atlanta waving the book at people and thumping on it a little bit. You know, this is it, this is it. And they said, "You people are sick, leave us alone." And so we went off and formed a Sicker Than Others group and told them that we had to study the literature. You know, we were so sick. But we're really glad that we did that. Like I say, we got 6 meetings in Flint now. We're discovering that there's other meetings around Michigan that have kind of sprung up. Chuck said the growth in Narcotics Anonymous is phenomenal in the last 5 years. In Michigan, it's phenomenal in the last 1 year. We've been lucky enough to find several meetings in Michigan. We get to the convention and find out that there's someone here from Petoskey or some ungodly place. They got a meeting up there, and we didn't know about that, so we can revise our statewide list. We got 2 meetings up there. I think last year I was only aware of 3 or 4 meetings of Narcotics Anonymous in all of Michigan, and I'd say that now there's probably 30. And we're just tickled shitless over that. We're going to establish a meeting in Detroit, and I'll bet you when I see you at the next World Convention, we'll have a Detroit meeting. Presently there isn't one there, but it'll be there. We're creeping in on them. We got one in Pontiac now and one in Ann Arbor, and it's just moving. We're just not going to be able to stop it. Thank you.
I'm an addict. My name's Thor. Thor. Hey, how are you? Back in 75 and 76, when I first came around AA, there was no NA. And I was dragged into the Alano Club up here by dope fiend that wouldn't say they were an alcoholic. And they got kicked out, and I got pissed off because I guess I could have gone to be an alcoholic or a dope fiend in one way or another. I stuck around the alcoholics and irritated them until they were ready to kick me out. And about that time, there's somebody got a little ticked off at one of the treatment centers up here, Wisconsin Family. A woman who was, bless her soul, took off and started an NA meeting in a house up on the east side of Milwaukee. And somebody dragged me to it. They thought I needed it. One of the reasons I needed it at the time is I didn't have a job when I came around. I went to work as a church organizer, Linsky type, if anybody knows what social action organizing is. And I went to work for a guy who was manager of this church group, selling pot on the side to supplement his income, you know. And I had an AA roommate at the time because my wife had run off. And she was certified too. Crazy, I guess she's really just a dope fiend. Didn't relate to AA. Anyway, he came over and got involved with her, and my whole life got screwed up, so I needed AA, you know. I was, by that time, a full-blown addict if I hadn't been before, and if the doctors hadn't made me that way by trying to cure all my drinking and smoking and everything else, you know. I went to that first meeting, and by God, there was one of those doctors who had sent me those damn pills. He was sitting there talking about his own problem. I dearly love that man today. I still scrap with him every once in a while. He's going to give one of the workshops on recovery and relapse. I have a great deal of respect for the man. It went along kind of slow, you know, and then there was a meeting. It started out at one of the hospitals here, Dewey Center in Milwaukee, and then there was a meeting down at DePaul. And I got a little tired of that church organizing. I decided to start my own group and go out and find where the money was going in terms of treatment of addictions, and they put me on the staff by mistake down at DePaul. Called me a psychometric evaluator because I had a few psychology courses. I was clean. I wasn't really what I call, you know, I didn't have a life balance. I didn't what I call have real sobriety. To me, clean and sober go together. And I left there in a big snit and started a Monday night meeting with a bunch of people who are trying to save my ass out of the Pentecostal prayer community. You know, and they're coming down with all the holier than thous and what do you call them, and glossolalia or tongue talking and all this crap. And there was a black Muslim around there who insisted that he said, well, Jesus was buried in India under a floor bed and all that. And I thought, I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit. Let's start a meeting and talk about our drugs. I mean, you're going 6 months to the psych ward and all that kind of thing, you know. Why don't we get over this drug problem and then worry about Jesus under a floor bed? Who cares if he was on a cross or under a floor bed? Don't matter to me. And anyway, these guys started some kind of we had a sort of a powerhouse meeting going there, and pretty soon DePaul was sending all their patients down to this meeting we had going there. We didn't have any literature, really. You know, I knew there was an NA, but I thought, well, we'll send off for a little literature one of these days and get something going for us here, you know, and just use some little AA pocket cards. And one night, one of the born again came in there, and I tried to keep it on 12 steps, but he decided he got up in the middle of the room and talked about eternal life, and I thought, holy mackerel, you know. Let's close down the meeting, say the Lord's Prayer, and I took him over and turned him over to a security guard at the YMCA who also happened to be a born again, and I said, now you guys argue it out, I'm going to work. And so from then on, really, quite a little impetus came out of that group and out of the hospital groups and stuff, and things have developed to the point where we have about 30 meetings here in town, or in Wisconsin, I guess around the area. And they're growing like a wheat, you know, and you know, God bless this program, because I could never have made it on AA alone. I mean, you know, the 12 steps are there, but I was so screwed up I couldn't relate to just having an alcohol problem because I had a lot of other ones too, you know. So I only do hope that, and just one thing I want to say, and anybody else wants, some people know more facts and figures than I do because I kind of don't relate to being a bureaucrat when it comes to the 12 steps, you know. And I do hope though these programs can grow side by side. I hope that NA and AA don't fight with each other. And I've done a hell of a lot of fighting myself in the beginning there. You know, I used to love to go up to the Alamo Club and stick it to them, you know. but that's just because I'm a bullhead, and they don't all have to be that way. So, anybody else here from Milwaukee that has more facts and figures about what's going on right now, that's fine.
Good afternoon. My name is Denny, and I'm an addict, and I'm from Williamsport, Pennsylvania. I'm not nervous, so I'm going to stutter just to make myself feel part of. Anyway, NA came about at Williamsport. It'll be, as Paul said, 10 years ago, another 2 weeks. It came about by having a, from the way I understand it, 3 men getting together, a man named Dutch, that probably a lot of you know, Dutch Huber, and two of the men from the area. And it started in a hospital. In the hospital, I guess 2 of the men were members of Alcoholics Anonymous, and the hospital required that there be 2 people from AA, like, sponsor the meeting. And it started and it continued on. And 3 years later, another NA meeting started in a like a little building beside this church. And it was in a room, and there was no furniture. There was these little kindergarten chairs. And about 5 months later, I came about. And I came into my first meeting, and the guy that introduced me to NA told me to make sure that I kept an open mind when I walked through them doors. You know, he said you're going to meet a lot of crazy people. And I did. I went in, and all these people would tell me they were drug addicts and all this kind of stuff, and I was kind of like shocked. But anyway, I continued making meetings. We had 2 NA meetings there a week, and numerous AA meetings. I was I don't know what you want to call it, but I was one of the guys that was going to the AA meeting, calling these old fuckers bullshitters. You know, they're trying to say so with their program, and I'm there, you know, leading the pack, you know, swearing at them, you know, trying to get my thing done, you know, and you know they were literally telling us to get out, you know, and I have since grown to respect their traditions. But our little meeting on Monday nights was kind of crazy. It started at 7 o'clock, and it didn't end till everybody in the room talked. It was about 15, 20 people there. We had a guy named Andy J. who lives in Florida now. He's a black man. He was the most grateful person I ever met. He would talk for anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour every Monday night. I was like 3 weeks sober, and I couldn't take him no more. He was like, we went to a meeting every night, and he did the same thing every night. I used to cut him off. Like every 5 minutes he would stop and take a breather and say, "I'm grateful." I gave him 2 I'm gratefuls, and I jumped right in there and said, "I'm dead and I'm an addict." We had fights there every other week. He had these little kindergarten chairs, and somebody would say something wrong, and 5 guys would throw a chair at him or something like that. Thank God it ain't that way today. It was a therapeutic environment. You know, it was not NA. It was not NA. You know, I was a bullshitter when I come around. You know, I was scared. I went to a meeting and I talked all the good things because you know the first meeting I was there, I heard somebody say something about what they did wrong, and everybody in the meeting was screaming at him. It was crazy. and they kept surviving. We started going to some prisons on Sunday afternoons. I'm sorry, Saturday was the NA meetings in prisons. Things kept happening. 4 years later, they started a meeting in on noon. Every day at noon was in a park, you know. I was kind of jammed up about going there because, you know, I'm from this hometown and I'm a city employee, and I wouldn't go because I didn't want nobody to see me out in the park and ask me questions. And a year later, Blair Hare started a meeting in his house on Sunday afternoons, and that has grown and is now held in a hospital on Sunday afternoons. And Williamsport's a very small city. It's only 28,000 people there. We have a tremendous recovering community. We started out with, when I came around 6.5 years ago, with 2 meetings, and today we have 10 meetings, which is a miracle. There's at least one meeting every day, and there's like several days they had 2 meetings. We have an answering service, and we had just formed our own district or area about a month ago. I guess is where it was. But things are really going good. There was still a lot of confusion. Some of the meetings I don't consider any meetings. And I just heard, I forget who said it, and I'm going to take it back. Because they sit around and talk about problems, and someone just said, if you sit around talking about problems, you're only going to have problems. And, you know, I like that, you know, because we have people coming and complaining and saying, you know, this guy has to talk about his problem, what happened to him today. You know, I don't want to go to a meeting here about, you know, some guy talk for a half hour about, you know, his toothbrush broke or something like that. You know, I don't need that. You know, I want to hear about recovery. You know, I continue to try to share it, and, you know, I get battles over that, but, you know, I'm persistent, you know. And I made it through all them old drunks trying to throw me out of the meetings. You know, people, you know, have since accepted me, and I've done the same. And I'm really grateful for Milwaukee putting this convention on. That's all I got.
I'm Eddie. I'm an addict.
Hey.
I'm from Montgomery, Alabama. Hi, y'all. I came into the fellowship March of '80, looking for a way out of a court case. Wanted to be a court case. I was living on the Gulf Coast down in Pensacola, and I went to a rehab for the court case and all, and had this little meeting on Monday night downstairs. And if you wanted to go, you could. If you didn't, you didn't have to. And somebody mentioned that might even help my court case. So I went. There's a group of people down there who said they were like me, and they talked about things I'd done, and they looked like me, jeans and burnt-out T-shirts and tennis shoes, and it was attraction that made me keep coming back at that point. There was the only NA meeting in Pensacola at that time. I think it was like the second meeting that I started getting confused, because I'd walk in the meeting and some people were talking about being sober, and some were talking about being clean, some were talking about recovery, and some were talking about sobriety. So I decided at that point that there was other things about NA, or there was other programs that would help me in my recovery, and I went to these other programs mainly because one meeting a week wasn't getting it for me. But from that point, I wanted more NA. You know, I wanted a meeting every night of the week and that kind of thing. And when I started asking questions about this, the answers were, that's not for you. Let it grow when it's supposed to grow, and slow down, and those kind of things. So I let that go and stayed clean for about a year, and ended up in Panama City at a convention, the NA convention, and that was when surrender came to me to NA. And Chuck was talking about how important the conventions are. And I know that's the importance of that one, that I truly came to accept NA as a true viable means of recovery. And from that point on, I've always taken the first tradition of my Commonwealth welfare coming first, and also that our unity depends on our recovery. And I've always had a desire to see NA grow from that point on. And I became involved with the local service NA, and for the recovering addict at that point it was something with glory and medals and badges of honor and that kind of thing. And Pensacola, it grew. The groups grew. It went from 1 meeting a week to 6 meetings a week in 9 months. But Eddie in his old Econoline van was running all these meetings, and I had a Miller beer box, and it had the coffee pot and everything in it. And I'd hit the rehabs about 3 or 4. I'd put 20 people in the van, and I was pretty much the group conscious and one ultimate authority. And, I had to do a little bit of surrendering. It came to a point that I was ready to use again. I'd even gone as far as lining up about 12 bags in the motel room and made a connection, with a relapser who was going to fix me up. And about 2 or 3 hours before that happened, I ended up in the first NA meeting in Pensacola, and surrendering and crying and asking for help again. From that point on, it's been, I'm doing this for the addict seeking recovery and not for Eddie. But I moved out of Pensacola. I'm living in Alabama now in Montgomery, which is the capital, and it's still a small town. It's a big farm town. But it was a little bit larger than Pensacola, and I wasn't in touch with a fellowship up in Montgomery. I envisioned in my mind that I'm going to this big town and there's going to be NA all set up, and I'm not going to have to fool with this shit anymore. And I got up there, and it was the same thing all over again. And I said, "Thank you, guy." And I've been living there for about a year now, and it's growing. There's 2 meetings now, and a little H&I going. And Alabama as a whole just formed a region. It went from no areas to 3 areas in a region in a year. And I don't hold any position, no chair or vice or secretary or anything like that. And when all these elections were going on and all, they were, saying, "Well, we'll let Bobby Sue be this and these there." And I said, "Well, she don't have enough. She's got 3 months. I got 2.5 years and this and that, and I ain't gonna be able to do anything." And I found out that now I'm more active and doing more as far as service than I thought I would be doing if I had some kind of a label or tag on me. I'm grateful for that. But it's the region that we formed is growing, and we're putting on little conventions and things like that. And there's no big deal to it. There's the same kind of problems and conflicts that very similar to what everybody else has. I found that give it a little time and not fight it, and stick to the traditions, and things do work out. Greg brought up any kind of specific problem that we thought we might see that we're having the most trouble with in our communities. Really, there's not any. No, there's no big deals. They'll all be worked out. And it's taken a long time to come to that kind of peace of mind. I still go on and on about it and talk to people. What about this? What about that? Ain't that screwed up? That's wrong, and this and that. But it'll all work out. There's just been too much happening, and as we grow and our experience is shown to us that we can use, there's nothing that I can say, well, this is gonna ruin us, or this is gonna wipe it out, and this will be the end of it. Because I know that just from what I've seen, that things will go all right. We came up there last year at the World Convention. There wasn't anybody from Alabama this year. There's about 12 of us here, and we're talking about putting in a bid next year for a World Convention and all that kind of thing. And I think one reason that the growth has been slow in Alabama is that Southerners tend to be slow anyway. But it seems like we had regions formed all around us. We had Mississippi and Georgia and Florida and all, and we were kind of right in the middle of that, you know. And everybody was telling us, "Well, we're waiting on y'all. Y'all come on," you know. But I'm glad to be a part of this growth. As Chuck was saying about the pioneer thing, not in an egotistical way, but that's very true. You know, we're the ones that are, you know, our work's cut out for us. It really is. And I found that through this service and all, and the growth of our groups and all in Montgomery, that the experience I'm building now applies to my daily life. And if I wasn't involved with the service and all, and kind of rested along and waited till something happened, I don't know how I can handle it. I find now that, you know, it's kind of a daily thing that I have to apply my program to, my personal program to, when I'm involved in services. Things come up that they make me work my program. I'm grateful for that. But Montgomery, Alabama formed a year ago. We're the first group is celebrating our first anniversary, the 18th of this month, and there's another group started. There's a big need for a literature meeting to start. I think that would be important for a community to have some kind of study of the steps and traditions and that kind of thing. We have I found that most of the people that want NA recovery are the newcomers, and the old timers tend to be the ones that want to hold back and all. I'm okay with that. Everybody has a right to do what they want to with the program. But there's no bigger thrill to me to see some young guy or gal, you know, get up and get all high and excited and, oh, we got to do this, we got to do that, and that kind of thing just really gets to me, you know. We get, you know, 17, 18-year-old people in our groups that they want recovery in NA, and they believe in it totally. That's about all I got to say. I'm grateful to be here, and I'd like to hear some more about other areas. Thank you.
We're supposedly out of time, but you know how we are. But let's run through it quick. Come on, next row.
And I'm from Wichita, Kansas. And I kept waiting, hoping that somebody else from Kansas would get up here, so I didn't have to do this, because I don't know that much. I do know that growth is real slow for us right now. Real slow. I started in the program in 1979, and I think I had 32 days straight when I was at the Atlanta convention, and I thought, Jesus Christ, they do talk slow. You know, God, my God. I about went crazy in one of those marathon meetings, because I was just so hyped. And I'm still real hyped, but I'm slowing down a little. It's not that they talk slow, I was just going about 90 to nothing. But anyway, from what I do know about our growth in Wichita, Kansas, we started out in a PO's office, and the PO kind of monitored the meeting. It was real weird. It was real weird, and that was in, I think, 76 and 77, and then I was introduced to the program in 78, and being a prescription junkie, you know, I couldn't relate to the people. I didn't want to relate to them. I went to my first meeting, and they said, well, you know, if you really want to get sober, you might give up the script. And I said, oh, I don't want to do that. I didn't want to do that. And so for a year and a half after that, I just, you know, did my thing, and NA kept on. It kept on, and they had a clubhouse. They went rabbit meetings, like Chuck was saying, and we went the church routine, you know, where, and we had to go places where you couldn't smoke. Boy, that didn't last very long. We finally said, we got to have a clubhouse. And we got a clubhouse in Wichita, Kansas, and it's called the Ash Street Group. And from then, things just sort of took leaps and bounds, and we went to a bunch of us went to Atlanta's convention, and we walked away from that convention with the bid for the next convention. And see, I don't know much about all that. I was just there. But I did grow that year because I got involved. And we had a literature convention conference, first one, I think, about a month after the convention in Atlanta. And we sat down and actually had meetings and workshops and minutes for literature to get started on a big book. And I do know that the regions, you know, things are pretty speckled in Kansas. We've got a meeting here and we've got a meeting there, and you know, there's a meeting in Salina and there's a meeting in Topeka, a couple of them, and there's a meeting around Fort Riley and Junction City, and there's a meeting in Manhattan, Kansas. And there's 4 groups now in Wichita, and one of them is a women's group, and I'm real proud of that group. Boy, we've grown tremendously in that respect. We have campouts and things like that. But unfortunately, our growth as far as getting another group in Wichita, I think, started out of the problem with the 12th tradition. Some people let some principles, you know, and personalities get screwed up. But I look at that as being a blessing, because today now we have 3 other groups besides Ash House. And so I see that to be real progress. But we had to cut back a meeting. We had meetings every day. And we've had a lot of our long-term, quote, long-term members, you know, 4 and 5 years, that's a pretty long time in Kansas, move away. One's in Atlanta now, or Georgia somewhere. One's in California. One's up in Lawrence, Kansas now, and one's in Belfast, Ireland. And so our little core group from the very beginning is of 2. And then there's recovery is slow. You know, 2 years for one recovery, maybe. You know, we do have a lot of institution meetings going. A lot of those, you know, treatment folks. And some of them come back. Not a whole lot. We need a lot of work in that area. But, you know, we're growing slowly. I think right now I see individuals maintaining pretty well, but I see a problem with groups, you know, and group unity. And I hope that it's growing pains and that pretty quick we'll get some relief. But this year there are bunches of people from Kansas. Last year in Miami I didn't get to go. You know, I wanted to real bad, and then I just didn't get there. And I think 2 people showed up from Kansas. But we're better represented this year, so I think we're on the uphill. I think that's about all I have to say. I'm real glad to be in Milwaukee. Last time I was here, I was locked up in a dorm room, and I was loaded, and I went into convulsions, and I'd locked myself in the door, and I couldn't get out. And so this time it's on a little better. Boy, I'm a little healthier, you know. I'm not doing drugs, and I'm straight, and I'm having a good time. Thank you.
My name's Bob Natick. I'm from Fort Lauderdale. We've been doing this lately, and the first group that we can find is on Greg's list. It was 1969 in Key West, which lasted about a month, and that was it. The next one is still going, the same place, 10 years now.
West Palm Beach. It's a mainline group, real appropriate. And for a year and a half, the mainline group consisted of 3 people, and they told each other stories, and then they made stories up to tell each other. And that guy told me that. He told me they used to sit around and make stories up just because they got bored of each other, and that's what happened. 74 started a meeting in Miami, which is still going. New Connections Group, which grew out of Atlanta. A member that got clean in Atlanta moved down there and started it. In Lauderdale in 77, meeting started in Lauderdale, and that meeting's still going. It has about 50 people every week, and we have a beginners meeting now. Beforehand, gets about 30 people, and in like I went out to the conference in 80, and the best information I could get, there were 20 meetings in the state, which included Pensacola. And I didn't know that till I got out there. You know, I had been to Narcotics Anonymous. I got clean in Pennsylvania, and been to Narcotics Anonymous in Florida, which is like going to a big AA meeting. Which really like bummed me out because I got clean in AA. And so I went out to California because I heard about all these mega gods. You know, found out they were sick motherfuckers, you know. I liked it. It was right at home. And, you know, I found it fucking worked, man. And that was the most important thing. You know, and someone could get up and say, you know, if they were clean 20 years because of this program, you know, that made sense. You know, finally I knew I was home. The one thing I remember that Jimmy came and told me, a phrase he had said, you know, is that a man without a goal is only half a man, and that a fellowship without a vision is a farce. You know, and that to me is like a lot of sense there, you know, because I never had anything to work towards, you know. And when I was going to meetings in Lauderdale, and I was going every night, all one night of the week, you know, I knew it could happen. And we did a lot of dope fiend fighting. We were in a meeting one night, and the guy started reading the big book, and I was the only person there who'd like ever been to NA anywhere else. And I got up and said, you know, made an asshole out of myself and everything. I didn't go back to the meeting the next week, and that's all right. What ended up happening was somehow it grew. I mean, just somehow. You know, I believe it's God. We went out to Kansas. Well, I didn't go. 4 people went out. We put in a bid for the World Convention. Everything in the bid package was a lie. We never talked to any hotel. The hotels we talked to, we listed the Fontainebleau, which is like $150 a day to stay at, you know, without anything, and listed it for $30, you know. You know, everything was a total lie, and we got the convention. The next year, and at that time, that was September of 80, we got it. The next year we fought and fight, and we actually did fist fight, actually did think of putting contracts out on people. I mean, threw people in pools, punched people out in meetings, you know, really good. A lot of people stopped coming in about that. I'll run it short there. What ended up happening was a lot of people started traveling. I started going all these fucking places, and they come back and say, "What's with this sick motherfucker?" So they decided to go find out, you know, and then they started acting like sick motherfuckers too. And so they all started following. Everybody said, "Oh wow, far out." At the World Service Conference in 81, I know of, we had 35 meetings in the entire state, including Pensacola. That was it. And there was maybe 5 outside of South Florida, okay? As of the World Convention, we had about 40 legitimate, all right? We had the World Convention, and 517 people showed up, which was a miracle, because we really didn't expect that the controller strike was in and all that crap. We had the World Lit Conference, and the techs got finished in Miami, and that was something else. We had we made $10,000 in the World Convention, And then the literature conference, we lost 1,000. So we dope-fiended the money and got it paid for. What's happened since, I'll just say what's happened from last year to now. There was 40 meetings, there's 106 now. There was one area of service, now there's 7 legit. There's 5 others working on it. We have meetings in Key West. There's a meeting in a town that has maybe 5,000 people in it, you know. There's an addict that keeps calling from Okeechobee. Okay? All right. We do have a spelling contest after this meeting to get that right. Okay? So a lot's been happening. We got 106 meetings and a fellowship of about 1,000 people. We held our first state convention. We had a registration of 502 that showed up. All right? It's a miracle. We're thinking of having 2 or 3 regional conventions. Our region was only formed last December. Since December to now, miracles have been happening. I've met people in NA that I don't know. That are there's people here from Palm Beach, which is 30 miles from me in Miami, I've never met before. So NA must be growing. If I don't know, I used to think I knew everybody. I was that important. I don't fucking know these people, man. Let's think. I think the greatest thing is that you know, that thing about no addict need ever die, man, and that's really true. You know, I mean, Fort Lauderdale's known for 2 things: sun and cocaine. You know, and I met a guy who got off the Nimitz about 2 weeks ago. He was in a meeting, and the Nimitz was in Fort Lauderdale about a month ago. He got off the boat and said, you know, I came to Narcotics Anonymous a couple years ago, and I was in AA, and there's 3 things that I heard of, 3 places I hear Narcotics Anonymous, and that's Georgia, California, and Fort Lauderdale. And that made it worth it, man. The guy traveled on a boat from wherever the fuck he was, Cuba or Africa or something, and showed up at an NA meeting off a boat, you know. And that guy took literature and started a meeting on the Nimitz, you know. And that's a miracle. So no addict anywhere need die. That's all.
There's a women's meeting due to start in here right now. I'm sorry we didn't get around to all the areas. Please write it down and get it around. Give it to Pete. Okay, let's pray.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom,